Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Just when you think things can't be any stranger, they just keep on piling on. The latest is Joe Biden with his various apparently caches of all over Delaware of classified documents that he got when he was vice president and wasn't supposed to still have when he ceased to be vice president. Unlike President Trump, who declassified those documents that the FBI raided his home in Mar-a-Lago to find, which were all legally held by President Trump. These documents were not legally held. The vice president has absolutely no right. He cannot declassify documents. He doesn't have that capacity. And so having those documents were a violation of law. What's more, it opens up the door to questioning about the National Archives. The National Archives seem to want to count every single document that ever exists in the Trump administration and go after President Trump if they can't count them all. And yet apparently there's thousands of documents from the Obama administration that the National Archives hasn't asked for, doesn't care if they exist or not, and many of those classified. So we're looking at, once again, even the National Archives have been weaponized with President Trump being the person who they're weaponized against. But one of the things that bothers me most about this, and it's not even just the classified documents, it's the fact that the FBI knew that that Joe Biden was holding classified documents illegally and had found those classified documents on November 2. They didn't tell anybody about it, at least November 2. That's when they tell us they found it. So, but they didn't tell anybody about it before the election on November 8. They didn't want to, and they didn't tell anybody about it. They didn't include it into the special counsel probe of President Trump which they announced in middle of November with a guy named Jack Smith, who is the special counsel. They didn't mention it before the Herschel Walker special election in Georgia. Didn't want to have anything go wrong there that they hadn't planned on. No, they held off until literally the last week and a half to start talking about this. And now they found apparently 3 different locations with these documents. And I don't remember seeing, it's amazing. I don't remember seeing a Mar-a-Lago raid, but I know you remember it, David.
For that unprecedented FBI search at the home of former President Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Tonight, ABC News has learned that the FBI told the Secret Service just 45 minutes before they arrived, and then the Secret Service telling Mar-a-Lago staff just moments before those agents arrived. Sources telling ABC News the search is related to allegations the former president improperly removed documents when he left the White House. They were brought to Mar-a-Lago, including classified material. And it wasn't the first time federal agents had been to Mar-a-Lago, their first visit in the spring. We have learned tonight that it was a staff member at Mar-a-Lago who called Eric Trump, and Eric Trump who then called his father to tell him about the search. The former president was in New York, seen leaving Trump Tower last night, and tonight here the first words from the former president while calling into a political event, saying, "Another day in paradise. This is a strange day." Sources tell ABC News the Department of Justice had started a grand jury investigation in May about alleged mishandling of classified information. Tonight, heavily armed Secret Service agents stand guard at the gates of Mar-a-Lago, and this evening, former President Trump issuing a new statement calling the search a horrible thing. Tonight, what we have now learned about how this unfolded, where they searched, and about pressure mounting on the Attorney General Merrick Garland and FBI Director Christopher Wray, appointed by former President Trump, to somehow explain this highly unprecedented raid.
Now, this is, that's the Mar-a-Lago raid. I wanted to go back and show just still on the picture of all those boxes, because if you remember those boxes, almost all of those boxes were in a special room that was set aside specifically for those documents. Okay. That's where those boxes were. They weren't sitting, and so they weren't sitting in the garage. They were sitting in a secure room that the Secret Service was involved in guarding. So this is a little bit different a lot different than what the Biden situation is in two ways. And I think what we need to know about this is the left is going to try to conflate the two. They're going to try to bind them together and say, see, everybody, this is Trump, this isn't anything different than what Trump did. There's two major differences. Number one, President Trump was allowed to have those documents. He declassified the documents. Now, the FBI didn't like it that he declassified them, but he did. And he'd been working with the FBI for weeks, if not months, to get those documents declassified. The FBI was stonewalling. So finally, on the 20th of January, 2021, President Trump said, these are all declassified. And he, as president, has the right to do that because ultimately the declassification power rests in the presidency, not at the FBI. The FBI is an instrument of the president, is part of the executive branch. And so all power that the FBI or Department of Justice have flows from the president, flows from the executive, from the elected executive, not some lifetime bureaucrats with a grudge. So let's just be clear. President Trump legally had those documents. A vast majority of those documents were in the safe room that they were supposed to be, that they were in. So this idea that there's documents strewn everywhere. Now, the FBI but they did the raid. They went through Melania Trump's lingerie drawer. They went through Barron Trump's room. They went through the entirety of the home, large though it may be, in search of documents. And that's in a very highly publicized move. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a single picture of the FBI going through the Biden residence in Wilmington. In fact, what we know is that the FBI worked closely with President Biden's attorneys to be able to come through and pick up some stuff that the attorneys found in the residence, in the garage. For those of you who haven't seen a picture of where they found this, it's kind of an interesting thing. Here it is. So this is Joe Biden. He quipped today, well, they're in the garage right by the Corvette, and the garage is locked. Well, if you look, and somebody else did this circle, I don't know who it was, but this is Joe Biden. This is the Corvette, which his dad gave him in the 60s, as keeps in the garage. Very nice looking car. But back here, you see all this junk piled up right there? That's the secure location. That is the secure location. Well, I'm sorry, apart from it being messy, it's not very secure. Although I will say there's some advantage to having a messy desk. It means that nobody but you can find anything, and sometimes not even you can find it. But that's your picture. That's the secure location that Joe Biden had it. Yet he was given the courtesy of having his attorneys notified and everybody doing it really nice. We didn't see any 6 a.m. raids on his home, his Wilmington, Delaware home. We didn't see any of that stuff. That's reserved for President Trump, who actually legally had the documents. We sent out, Americans for Limited Government sent out a statement today that was related to this. And I wanted to just remind that we now have 3 independent or special counsels. We have John Durham still, and who knows what he's doing. We have this guy, Jack Smith, who is busily, came out just today. He's busily investigating where the people who he's targeting in his investigation are getting the money to defend themselves. So somehow the special counsel is seeking to deny representation of people who he's investigating because he's putting the people who are funding the defense and sending subpoenas out to the people who are funding their defenses to make them effectively defenseless. That's a special counsel in action. We remember from the Mueller probe how everything was about, they knew there was no underlying crime. but they sat there. That Russiagate was in fact a hoax, and they spent the entire time trying to entrap people and get people on on other offenses so they can turn them in the probe. Well, you know what? The job of the justice system isn't to create crimes, isn't to entrap people in crimes. The job of it is to determine if crimes were committed. And the fact of the matter is, what Jack White is doing in the Mar-a-Lago probe, the Trump probe, is he's attempting to deny people actually having the ability to have counsel to face the special counsel, because these things, if they drag you into it, it's $100,000 minimum. Most people don't have that laying around, and Jack White wants to make certain they don't. So they don't have competent counsel, and they're left to the devices of a special counsel who will make their life a living hell for the next 3, 4, 5 years. That is not justice. And that's what's happening with our special counsel system even today. Now, that was based on a report out of Washington Examiner that I read this morning. So that's where the sourcing on that. Normally I'd show you the thing. But the statement we put in was very simply, it's time that Congress revisit the legal and regulatory basis for these unaccountable prosecutors that undermine basic due process rights and the confidence in our electoral system. Yeah, Congress needs to take a hard look at this, because quite honestly, this is garbage. Having a special counsel that's basically up in the grill of anybody who happens to end up being president, and in relatively minor offenses. In this case, president has, the Biden situation was clearly a violation of law. The Trump situation clearly wasn't. But the fact is that this is a weaponized DOJ means they can use the special counsel system against anybody. They can go after anybody. They can go after the subordinates in such a way that makes it impossible for a president to hire anybody, because who would want to put themselves through that kind of garbage? That's what's happening with this. It's a disaster from a due process standpoint. It reflects the very worst aspects of our judicial system. And quite honestly, it's time and Congress needs to get to the bottom of this and determine whether or not the special counsels that are being appointed by the Department of Justice are even legal under the law that's written by Congress. That's a very important thing for them to do. And the fact that this is a special counsel that is focused on Biden allows for there to be a bipartisan review of what the heck's going on at DOJ with this, the special counsel abuse of power through the special counsel system. What's more, for those people who don't know, the DOJ, the guy who DOJ appointed, who Merrick Garland appointed today to do the Biden probe, actually was working for Rod Rosenstein, and in terms of monitoring the Mueller probe, that they really weren't monitoring. And so this guy, while he was he followed Rod Rosenstein, who was the U.S. attorney from Maryland. He was the number 2 in the U.S. attorney's office in Maryland and Rosenstein. He then went to Department of Justice with Rosenstein was the number 2 in Department of Justice, but was running it because Jeff Sessions recused himself from the whole Russiagate stuff thing. And so Rod Rosenstein was running this, and the guy who is the new counsel was in fact the principal deputy under Rod Rosenstein all through Russiagate, when Rod Rosenstein was busy signing off on the FISA warrants and everything else. This guy was up to his ears in that process, and so now we're going to have him as a special counsel dealing with the Biden situation. And quite honestly, I have little faith that the law, that something which is an obvious, direct violation of law, which is Joe Biden having these classified documents, no matter where he was holding them, it's against the law. Donald Trump having the classified documents was within the law because they had been declassified by Donald Trump. Hence, you have one person who legally held the documents, another person who illegally held the documents, and yet and yet they're going to be treated as equal. And and they aren't. And so don't be fooled on this. They're going to try to say there's an equivalency between what Biden's done and what Trump's done. And the truth of the matter is Joe Biden had documents that he illegally held. He didn't, and he could have gone into a secure location, reviewed those documents if he needed it for writing a book or something like that, but he couldn't have physical possession of them. On the other hand, but Donald Trump had every right to have physical possession of the classified documents because he was, in fact, the president, and he could declassify them. So I've made that point ad nauseum, but I think it's important. We have to remember that there is a huge difference. And the thing that bothers me most about all this, it really just gets to the core of it. There is no due process with a special counsel. They are basically a star chamber prosecutor who can do whatever they want. Their objective is, as we saw with Russiagate, their objective was, even though they knew there was no underlying crime, even though they knew Russiagate was a fraud, a hoax, a political hoax, they knew that. How do we know? Well, Peter Strzok from the FBI did not want to go work for the Mueller investigation because he stated in his emails or text messages with his girlfriend, his mistress, Lisa Page, that there wasn't any there. They'd been looking at this and there was actually nothing there. And so he didn't want to go work at the Mueller investigation because there was nothing to the investigation. And so the Mueller investigation became nothing more than an entrapment device. And Congress needs to protect the rights of citizens, even citizens who are elected to office, they have to protect their due process rights. They have to ensure that this kind of rogue prosecutorial system is shut down so that we have actual, real, live constitutional rights, separate from a prosecutor who just decides they're going to make your life a living hell. And I go back to the press clippings from today, talking about Jack Smith, the Trump special prosecutor on classified documents, and how he's attacking those who he's actually investigating by trying to undermine their ability to have defense by attacking the people who would give to a defense fund. How dare him? How dare he? That is so wrong. It's wrong on every level. And so quite honestly, I'm going to just say I'm sick of it, tired of it, and I've had enough. So it's time for this new Congress, to go after this, and let's dismantle this system that gives the Department of Justice almost unlimited power to have a special counsel just engage in abuse people's civil liberties as part of and be called in some way a white knight. The most tarnished white knights in the world are some of these special counsels. And when the Democrats didn't like it, after Ken Starr and President Clinton, who was an independent prosecutor, which is different, was actually authorized by Congress, they went and repealed the independent prosecutor law. So they repealed that law because they didn't like what Ken Starr did. Well, it's time we take a review of this whole thing and allow due process rights extend to the President of the United States and other elected officials the same due process rights that everybody else thinks they have. But the truth is, if they can do it to the president, they can do it to any one of us. I did want to go and take a look at a couple. We do remember why we have reason to distrust the FBI. But I came across a tweet by Carrie Lake, who is legitimately disputing the election in Arizona for governor. But she had a tweet that has nothing to do with that. But it's a good reminder. I'm going to click it up right now. Let's see if that worked. Boom. Let's see if that go. Okay, her tweet. A list of things the FBI has suppressed, redacted, and hidden from the public. Hunter Biden's laptop. Yeah, they had Hunter Biden's laptop in 2020, or early to mid 2020. And then they spent the next 6 months telling the social media companies This may be coming up. There may be something about Hunter Biden's laptop, but it's all a lie. It's all foreign. It's all foreign stuff. It's an attempt at foreign interference in our elections, and it's fraud. So it's misinformation. So you need to make certain nobody sees it and nobody finds out about it if it comes out. That's the FBI's big effort to find out about Hunter Biden's laptop. We got Ashley Biden's diary. Well, Ashley Biden's diary apparently is such important national security secrets that the FBI, that the U.S. Attorney of in Southern District of New York, is going after Project Veritas and James O'Keefe over Ashley Biden's diary. Why? Because somebody presented it to them and they didn't buy it. They didn't give them money. But apparently, it's a crime for Ashley Biden's diary to end up in the hands of a journalist. Astonishing, but Project Veritas is having to go through the legal hoops and the costs to defend themselves, because apparently Ashley Biden's diary contains great national secrets that cannot be, that nobody can be allowed to know. Even though they do directly relate to the current president of the United States. We all remember, the Department of Justice was busy prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell, but you know what they didn't do? They never released Epstein's little black book. That was confidential, high crimes and misdemeanors involved in having that be public. Can't do that. After all, we don't want anybody to know whose names are in there. So consequently, didn't do that. It's pretty astonishing, but doesn't seem like the FBI is all that interested in actually prosecuting anybody who is in that little black book, who might have been actually engaged in physically abusing young girls on Epstein Island or elsewhere. So no prosecutions there. They're holding on to that, pretty close to the vest. And then we got the 31,000 Hillary Clinton emails that the FBI couldn't seem to find, couldn't seem to get a grasp on. And by the way, had classified documents in those emails and on the servers, the unsecured servers that Hillary Clinton had all of her emails go through. Massive breach of security, massive violation of the classified documents laws, something that any one of us, if anybody else did this, they would have been prosecuted. But Hillary Clinton gets to walk on it. And of course, the Department of Justice affidavit related to the Mar-a-Lago raid, justifying the Mar-a-Lago raid. I just thought it was an interesting list because it reminds us of how weaponized the FBI is. And that's one of the things in terms of the statement we put out that I thought was most important. The Department of Justice now has normalized the idea that investigations, information that comes to their attention, should be run through a political prism and be evaluated based on politics, not based on what actually is in front of them. The fact that Hunter Biden's laptop has been sitting around for 2 years in their possession, over 2 years in their possession, with no prosecutions, nothing in it, even though Hunter Biden admits to illegal activity throughout. Is astonishing. It truly is astonishing. The fact that the decision they interviewed Hunter Biden's partner, Tony Bobulinski, in 2020, and then never contacted him back, never did any of that, never actually pursued anything, while after interviewing him, is astonishing. And now with Jim Jordan in charge of a committee to look at the FBI, this abuse of power by DOJ, Department of Homeland Security, and others, with that investigation going on at the House level and beginning to be launched at the House level, the answers that DOJ is providing, Department of Justice is expected to provide, will be, oh, this is part of an ongoing investigation, so we're not at privy to actually talk about it, to release anything to you. They're going to claim there's an ongoing investigation related to this, and that will be their excuse for not actually complying with congressional subpoenas. And you'll read in the headlines in the New York Times that the Congress is getting in the way of the official investigation. It'll probably be the first time you hear about readers of the New York Times hear about Hunter Biden's laptop, but that's what they're going to say. We know it. They've done it time and time again. And this is just such an incredibly dangerous situation that, for me, the best thing that the Jim Jordan committee can do, let's get to the bottom of it, but let's also go and take a look at the foundational legal justification for special counsels to be appointed, and let's rip them out of the law, or specifically prohibit them. If this is just, and I think it is, just a regulatory construct created by Department of Justice. And it's a regulation that goes beyond what Congress authorizes. So from a legal perspective, the West Virginia versus EPA case, which specifically says that the administrative state is constrained in terms of their regulatory activity to going only so far as Congress authorizes, and not create additional things, not build regulation upon regulation, so that there's no actual fundamental underpinning in the law that Congress passed. I think it's very, very possible that the entire special counsel structure is unconstitutional, illegal under West Virginia v. EPA. But let's not wait for the Supreme Court to figure that out in 6 years. It's time for Congress, to at least the House, to cut the guts out from this thing and force our Department of Justice to actually follow the law. What a concept. Take a few comments here. Let's see here. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit on the China, on a bill that just passed the House that deals with the prohibition on the Biden administration. Puts prohibition on the Biden administration from selling oil from strategic petroleum reserves to China or Chinese-controlled entities. Pretty important, given the fact that this administration has been jumping up and down, and their big energy accomplishment of 2022 was stripping our strategic oil reserves of most of their oil. And that was their big energy accomplishment that they claimed for 2022. You know, the fact that some of that oil was being shipped to the Chinese government-owned national oil company is so beyond belief and incredible, and such bad public policy that it's hard to believe that even the Biden administration would allow it to happen. But yeah, Congress now is jumping in and saying, no, you're not allowed to do this. And the good news, folks, is 331 House members voted in favor of blocking China from getting their hands on our strategic oil reserves. That means a lot of Democrats voted for that. What it also means is there's a veto-proof majority in the House should President Biden veto it. So now that goes to the Senate. It's just passed today. Representative Kathy McMorris Rodgers was the author. And this is, the House Republicans moving rapidly on trying to stop some of the massive security problems that exist in the Biden administration, and working at a bipartisan level to try to stop them from doing really stupid stuff. And now it's going to go to the Senate, and there are indications that we should be able to get a majority of the Senate, get up to 60, to be able to break any filibuster, and hopefully be able to get above 67, because that will create a veto-proof majority in the Senate. And it will be a big test for Joe Biden whether he wants to veto a bill and create a national fight, a veto override fight, over a policy that was stupid from the beginning, and he should have never allowed to occur. And that is to allow China to plunder our strategic oil reserves. So that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. I would encourage, we put out a statement today on that. I encourage you to go to getliberty.org. That's getliberty.org. And just take if you go there, right to that site right there, you'll be able to see the statement we put out on that. And I would encourage, when you see that, to give your members a call, both in the House, thanking them, and the Senate, urging them to pass it. Why don't we do this? I'm going to go to the comments and just see what people have got to say. And here's Rick Trader, good friend. The House will pass the House and will never be passed in the Senate or signed. I don't know, Rick, are you talking about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Or are you talking about the other? But I think there's a chance to get it signed, the Prohibition Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I think there's a possibility to get that done in the Senate. And I think there's a possibility of go into law without being signed, but it won't be over, because Joe Biden, the last thing they need is to have to do an override fight. So let's see. Florida girl, we're probably going to see everything go in this manner. Yeah, you're right in the fact that the House, there's been a lot of things that the House does that the Senate isn't going to. But I think on this one, I think given the bipartisan vote in the House, it puts a lot of pressure on the Senate. And I want to remind people that there's a lot of Democrat senators in vulnerable states who are coming up for an election in 2024. You've got John Tester in Montana. You have let's see, Michigan's Stabenow's now she's not going to run again, so that's an open seat. You've got the senator from New Mexico, Democrat senator from New Mexico's up. I think that's vulnerable. You've got one of the Democrats in Nevada who's up. That's vulnerable. You go through the list, and there's about 6 to 8 vulnerable Democrats who are up for election this time in the Senate. And so the political dynamic has shifted a little bit, and it will be interesting to see. You need 11 Democrats to get to 60. You need to get to 67. That means you need 7 more. So that's 18. But the fact of the matter is, the Senate has passed legislation that's pretty tough on China in the past year. So China may be the one place you can get something done. And I don't think their polling shows that selling our strategic oil to China polls really well from either party. So that's my goal, is to get there. Let's see here. Steve Nicholson, why would the FBI security state even report this Biden classified document issue? They could lie like they do all the time. Well, that's a great question, Steve. And it's actually what prompted me to do this live stream when I first decided to do it. And I took it out of my statement originally. And so I was kind of debating whether to go down this part. But here's what I think. I'll just give you what I think. There's one thing you can point to that's really, really different about this. Well, 2 things. Number one, the FBI they didn't do a raid, but they put it out in the press. And 2, USA Today and CNN and all the left-wing media are covering it. Whereas with Hunter Biden's laptop, they were all told by the FBI, don't you dare cover this. So that tells you that the left-wing media has been given the nod to start covering different problems that the Biden administration has on ethics issues and the like. And so I don't think he's going to be protected anymore. And the reason they wouldn't want to protect him is if they don't want him to run. That's, so they have to convince him he can't run by putting him under jeopardy by having scrutiny. And while that seems like it might be a little tinfoil hattish, if I hadn't experienced the last 6 years, I would never say that. But we've experienced the last 6 years, and we have to deal with the environment we're in, not the environment that we wished we were in. And the environment we are in is that our FBI intelligence services feel very comfortable trying to manipulate our election system. And the fact that they held this information when they had the classified, that Biden had classified documents on November 2, and they held it and didn't talk about it before November 8. They didn't include it into the special counsel attacking Trump. They didn't include it into, they essentially said, oh, we're going to segregate this. We're going to push it over here. And we're going to try to make it, we're going to put some special counsel on it so we can deal with this separately and not have to do and so we can create equivalency between what Biden's done and what Trump has, well, purportedly did, but didn't. So I think it's a shot across Biden's bow that politically he's not safe anymore. And that is the most dangerous thing that I could possibly say, because it tells you that I have a belief that and I think many of us agree that our DOJ, our current Department of Justice, is neck deep, not knee deep, neck deep, and trying to manipulate our political system. And when we have an intelligence agency that's attempting to manipulate our political system, it destroys the integrity of the whole system, and it destroys the ability for people to believe that the system is fair and honest. And while that's been under attack, and we all have real questions about the integrity of the elections the last 2 years, it is anytime you have the FBI and the intelligence community involved in just casually making decisions that when they're going to release documents based upon what the election cycle is, that's a terrible place to be. And we have to fix it. We have to fix it. You bring up a good point, Donna Norton. I think they'll bring up the 25th Amendment before too long. Very possible. It's very possible. But, I guess since they built a replica of a room that's a replica of a press conference room in the Eisenhower Executive Office building for Joe Biden to do sit downs, and it can be in the media in a very controlled environment. I guess they could just build a replica Oval Office in Wilmington and tell him he's still in the White House and just let him sit there and make phone calls to imaginary friends. But, the 25th Amendment requires the cabinet to do it. And truthfully, I don't believe they will go that far, because what they want is they want him to serve out his term. They certainly don't want Kamala Harris in the job. And so, because that would give her incumbent advantage to get the nomination. And we've seen how Cackles works. So no, I think it's, I think it's very possible that this is merely trying to get him to get Biden to get off the idea that he's going to run for re-election. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Ann. The Democrats don't want Biden to rerun for his fake presidency. I think that's right. And truth be told, they've got their golden boy who they really want in the White House, and that's Gavin Newsom. And so they've got, basically they put Biden in to do the third Obama term, and now they want to create a Justin Trudeau term, 2 terms of Justin Trudeau and Gavin Newsom, to put a stake through the heart of freedom in America. So that's where I think they are. That's what we have to fight against. That's what we have to defeat. And I will tell you, for all the focus that's been on the House and all the fighting in the House and all that, the single thing that's happening, I pray that this is true, that this focus on what's going on in abuse of power that we've seen, I pray that this abuse of power we've seen will bring people together to do things like, let's change the law, which allows for the Department of Homeland Security to coordinate with social media companies, coerce social media companies to shut down free speech. That was in the CISA law that was put into place in 2018. It needs to be ripped out. And I don't have a problem with the Department of Homeland Security if they get word that there's going to be an attack on a public utility, to be able to not require the people they're talking to, the public utility, to have a security clearance, to be able to warn them of an attack and to help them deal with the, prepare to stop that attack from being successful. I think that's fine. That's exactly what they should be doing. But right now, what the law allows them to do, this is the part that's disconcerting. The law allows them to do exactly what they're doing in terms of shuttering speech on places like Twitter. And we have to fix the law. And that means we have to go in and we have to rip part of the CISA Act out by the roots. And if we don't, this isn't one that the Supreme Court could knock it out based on Congress shall make no laws, because Congress did make this law. And so it violates the First Amendment. But it's a whole lot harder when Congress has done something for the Supreme Court to act than if Congress takes away that power and they continue to act. What's more, investigating it, this is where I hope Jim Jordan goes, investigating it, I believe that what they've done is the federal government has done, what the FBI and DOJ and others have done, and Department of Homeland Security, is they've effectively made these social media companies into nothing more than agents of the federal government. They are the implementers for the federal government of censorship regime. And as a result, as agents of the federal government, I believe they can be held liable for violating First Amendment rights. And but that's a court case that's worth having, because if the federal government, for instance, says we don't like certain activity and that's legal, and we want banks to not allow people to have banking, be able to bank for those things, we need to be able to shut that down. We need to be able to have the banks, the private entity that acts as an agent of the federal government, needs to be held accountable. And so they know that if you fall into the collusion with the federal government, if you become their agent to violate people's civil liberties, you become liable for that action. Because today, in today's America, the government isn't going to directly violate your rights, at least as much as they can get away with. But they're more likely to try to use private entities to do the dirty work for them. And we have to be able to stop that, because that's where they get right into your kitchen, because we aren't dependent upon the government nearly as much as we are dependent upon being able to do commerce using the banking system and things like that. So this is the fight we're going to have. This is a fight, but it goes right to the heart of the CISA Act, and we need to rip out this part of the CISA Act, which allows for the federal government, federal intelligence agencies, particularly Department of Homeland Security, to focus on and attack political speech through social media platforms. We need to end that. We need to end it now. And while we're at it, we need to end this special counsel, this abuse of power through special counsel, which denies people their basic due process rights. I'm sick of this. I think you are too. I would encourage you all to just tune in for more. We'll have another fun-filled talk tomorrow. And I believe that as we do these things, we're going to be unwinding a lot of stuff. And I will spend my time trying to let you know what's happening in Congress and the steps we need to take to create an American Renaissance so that we can be a shining beacon on the hill of freedom once again. And with that, I'm going to just let y'all go. And thank you very much for all that you do.